say, Tracy, I'm going to say something to you, and you're going to say, but from the minute I saw your house, like the minute I walked in, I went, this is a really interesting person, and I cannot wait to hear the story.
I remember the first day we met, you said, you're a homeschool parent. And I said,
You're a homeschool.
I'm not.
No, I'm not. Yeah. So Tracy and I are a part of what's called a Commonwealth in the Thomas Jefferson Education's philosophy of home education. And we've spent the last school year working with our children, getting to know each other, and forming this group called the Commonwealth to educate our children. And we only meet once a week. And yeah, it's been quite an adventure. So what I would like to hear about is the backstory with that. I would like to hear how you came to where you are sitting in that chair with that pretty blanket.
Okay, so here we are. So I was not happy with the public school system. We actually moved to where we live now for the school because it was such a highly ranked school. And I will say that the kindergarten, first, second was fantastic. And then third, fourth, fifth, there were changes made in the school. It started to decline. And I always heard the junior high was rough, and it was very rough. And so my son had to actually leave the junior high for a year because he had severe depression after that first year being in the junior high. And then he did an online school, and that worked really well for him. But because it was socially isolating, it was also unhealthy. So he went back into the 8th grade. He went back to public school, and he was doing okay. But my daughter was really struggling. And a lot of the things that they struggled with it had to do with culture. And it was very much a culture of, you are not allowed to think. You are only allowed to repeat what we tell you. If you have different views, different ideas, the chastising is subtle, but very much there. And it's very much, you're an outcast if you have these different ideas. And one of the examples I remember from back in the elementary school was this idea. They were doing a nutrition class, and they were talking about reading labels. And if you don't know what the label says, do not eat the food. If you don't know those words, here's a carrot. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Yes, carrots are healthy, but when you read the nutrition label on a box of food, there's also things in there that words that are strange to us, but they're healthy things. So why don't we learn about them, research them, talk about them with our families, and educate ourselves, and then we can make a decision as to whether or not that's something we want to consume or not. And then this idea was it's just not an acceptable idea of mine that I had on that topic. It just wasn't acceptable, which was baffling to me. So other topics would be things like history. When they taught history, they definitely taught all of the worst parts of history, which have to be recognized, but I don't think they need to be emphasized as heavily as they were. And when my kids would bring up different ideas in the classroom, they were really shut down as not okay. And I would call it bullying by the teachers. And it really created a lot of stress and anxiety in their world. I had lunch with my daughter every single day to help her try to manage these really difficult situations of being constantly shut down. And it was really stressful for her. So when the pandemic hit, one of the things I remember was, if you were talking about the pandemic, first of all, everybody was going to die. The panic was just
off the charts
right away. There was one teacher in the high school in my son's class that was trying to slow the panic down. Like, whoa, let's look at numbers, guys. Let's talk about history. Let's talk about other pandemics that have happened. Let's really open this thing up. And he was so shut down by everybody else that he really didn't get a chance to reach these kids. And it was panic mode. And one kid brought up, what if it came out of the Wuhan lab? And they were shut down, absolutely not allowed to say that. And we will not have conspiracy theories in our school. And I thought, wow, that is not, as a teacher, my thought was, on young minds to say, well, that is a possibility. We need to look into all the various possibilities, do research on them, and figure it out. So,
or just allow freedom for people to say the words.
Yeah.
Just the freedom to say, even if you want to say, yeah, that could be okay. Now on, we're going to go to the next, I mean, even if you just say, okay, you can say that or think that, you don't even have to discuss it, but you should at least allow kids to express in a public school the things that they're hearing at home, even if it is a conspiracy theory. Oh, it's all right.
And a lot of times we don't know. A lot of times we don't know. Teaching kids to look for answers instead of just repeat what they hear is really important. So then we went to online school, and I knew I didn't want to do online school through the public school system because it was a train wreck at the end of 2019. It was just an absolute train wreck. And we had finished 2019 at the regular online school, and it didn't go well. So when 2020 school year started, we did our own online school at a school I had gone to before with my son. And when they started the school year, they completely reformatted the program, and it looked just like all the other public schools, and it was terrible. And I sat through classes with my kids, and they were so mind-numbingly boring, and I could see the frustration developing in my kids because they were so bored, really totally disengaging from education altogether. A lot of isolation, playing video games in their rooms by themselves. It was very unhealthy, very unhealthy. So then there was this homeschool group, and my kids were older, but I really had always wanted a homeschool group in my community. So I went to the meeting, I listened to what they had to say, and I said, well, you can use our home as a place to have your homeschool, even though my kids won't be attending because they're high school age. They really need to stay in public school and finish out their last few years in public school.
So back up a little bit. How did you come to hear about the meeting?
A friend of mine tossed it out and said, hey, they're having this meeting. Do you want to go? And it was really one of these sort of the bricks get dropped kind of moment. And what are you going to do? Because I had talked about wanting change in schools for a long time and my frustrations with the public school system. I'd already taken my daughter out of a lot of the public school things. They have a PE class where they play soccer all the time, and soccer kids just want to win the game and are pushing over kids that don't play soccer. And she was getting hurt a lot. And we play soccer all the time. That's what we classify as a PE course. Or we play football all the time. And that's what PE is. Basically, whatever sport the teacher likes, we just do that pretty much the majority of the time. And so I took her out and had her do figure skating instead of doing PE. We had a music class that she was in that, the kids were just always out of control because the teacher didn't want them to sing certain songs. Like they had Christmas songs. You're not allowed to sing the one about Baby It's Cold Outside because it's about supposedly a man abusing a woman, even though it hadn't been that until just recently. But at the same time, we can sing songs from Appalachia about this woman who stabs this guy while kissing him and kills him. And I don't have a problem with that song. It is a traditional Appalachian. It's an old song. That's fine. But why can't we do the other one too? And the kids know this, and it frustrates them, and they're out of control, and the teacher's crying in the class, and the kids are going. So I just took her out of these afternoon classes, and I had her do figure skating on her own. So we had already.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that's such a funny. Oh my gosh!
But it's so
Are you serious? I've never heard these stories. That's really funny. That's rough. That's very rough.
It's like living in an alternate universe.
Yeah, but in the teachers' defenses, their hands are tied. There's not a lot they can do. I mean, I know several teachers, and they're just like, we have no, the inmates are running the asylum around here.
Yes.
The parents get mad if the parents get mad, and they freak out if you really try to do anything like disciplinary or anything. There's nothing they can do. It's just it's gotten bad.
And my kids heard plenty of times, I'll do whatever I want in school because my parents don't care if I get in trouble. They just parents that don't want to deal with their kids at home. They don't care. They just want them away from the home and in a school. And you can't suspend a kid whose parent isn't going to be home to monitor them. So they had in-school suspension in the back of my child's class. So those kids that were in in-school suspension just sat at the back of my kid's classroom and did whatever they wanted to, I guess. It just, everything about this is so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy.
It's complete anti-education.
Very
The
much
education
so.
system is an anti-education system.
It's just, it's become that. It's become a giant babysitting service, unfortunately. So if you have kids.
And a bad one at that.
Yeah. So the kids don't thrive. And it's frustrating. And there's plenty of teachers that are fully on board with having it be this way.
Yeah.
So
because they're exposed to, you know, some of the seedier elements of what's going. I mean, they hear things, you know, and they've been in it a long time. And in their way of thinking, the kids being in school is a safer place and a better place than at home.
Yeah, and it gives the teachers an advantage to indoctrinating students in their viewpoints. So they enjoy that aspect as well. I've definitely run across that. Yes, absolutely. One of the things they wanted to do, the kids to do, was attend a protest as junior high school kids to meet this Cardinal 3 or Cardinal 10 project that they were doing. Go attend a protest. And these are junior high age kids. Yeah. So at that age bracket, they're still not in a developmental stage where they're knowing exactly what they're doing, but they're forcing this on them at such a young age that the kids feel this empowerment to champion a cause that's not even their own, because they're not at an age where
has nothing to do with them.
No,
and it's not, and it's because it's all emotion based. So of course, you know, there's going to be this emotional tie-in, and you get people completely disconnected from the logic and the left side of your brain in making decisions, and you're good to go for a lifetime.
Yes. And one of
you have to teach logic. You have to teach reasoning ability. That is not something that comes naturally to most people.
Right. One of my favorite quotes are, emotions have no IQ.
Right.
And teaching pure emotionally based reactions.
Yeah.
React emotionally. Mm-hmm. So for all those reasons, when I heard there's going to be a homeschool group meeting, I felt like I didn't have a choice whether I wanted to or not. I need to go. And when I heard about what they were doing, I really wanted that for other families to be able to have. So I told them they could use our house.
I had no idea that's how you got started in this. That you thought you weren't going to be attending. I mean, what did you think you were going to do with your kids for that morning?
They were just going to do the online schools in their bedrooms.
Oh, okay.
So they would, which is what they had sort of.
It's not unreasonable. That's not unreasonable.
Yeah. So and I said, well, maybe because their online schools are so lackluster and horrible, maybe they'll just join a little bit if they want to. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that the school programs they were in were so bad that they just kept going. And we just decided, well, what the heck? We'll just join these homeschool classes. And I started purchasing homeschool curriculums to set up a school in our house. So I liked the Saxon math program that my school was using. I looked at Time for Learning and bought that program, which had science and math and language arts and art programs in it. I looked at and purchased another language arts program from The Good and the Beautiful, which I truly love that coursework. And so I was trying to run a regular school in my home. And then when the homeschool group came over, we did that group. And it was better than what was happening. But, you know, Time for Learning, I'm sure they try. But when I sat through those courses with my kids and took them with them, we had a science course. The chemistry course was literally, they did a lab and it was cartoon drawings of what might happen in a reaction. And the kids just laughed. They said, this is ridiculous. This is a cartoonification of a lab experiment. I feel so disconnected.
Just dumbing down, dumbing down, right?
And so we quit doing the Time for Learning because it's painful. It was painful for me to sit through. So I could not make my kids do it.
Right. So just to, inform our audience, you have two very, very bright kids. And so your kids are actually perfect for this sort of system, the sort of system that we did this year, because Adam knows more than almost anybody else in the entire group, including all of the adults, about certain subjects. I mean, he's encyclopedic. And your daughter is not much farther behind. I mean, I worked with, the group for one little bit, the older group that both your kids and then my oldest granddaughter's in, right? And her reports were amazing. I mean, she did this beautiful, laptop with the pictures and all that stuff, and she was miles ahead of the rest of the kids.
And I do credit some of that to some of the schools system. They were the kindergarten for second, third, fourth, fifth. Yeah, they did. They learned a lot of that in there. And Adam has a natural ability and interest in learning. He spends a lot of time on YouTube researching these topics that he loves. And Jenna, her biggest struggle when she got into the homeschool group was, I can do these assignments, but I'm trying to guess what the teacher wants me to give for my reports, because that's how they do in regular school. If you need to tell the teacher what they want to hear so that you can have a good grade. And her biggest struggle was, well, I don't know what the teacher's expecting me to say, so I'm not really sure how to make the teacher happy.
So by the end, she was finally letting go of some of that, finally realizing that everybody gets applauded for their effort. It's just simply a process.
And you're supposed to be thinking on your own. You're supposed to be doing your research, finding different viewpoints, thinking about things, not just trying to repeat back what the teacher has said, because in these reports they were giving, give a top report on, I don't know, California. They're not telling you about California and expecting you to repeat back from it. Right. They want you to go learn what you want to learn. And that was a very difficult concept for her, because that is not how the public education system worked. In fact, when she was in first grade, she had a passion for penguins, and she wanted to give a report on penguins living in warm climates. And there are penguins that live in Madagascar, the Humboldt penguins at our own zoo here. Their cage is kept at 96 degrees. Her teacher forbid it. You are not allowed to do that. Penguins do not live in warm climates, because I'm sure the teacher had seen that penguin movie on the March of the Penguins, where it was all down on Antarctica. And that was her only knowledge of penguins. So when my daughter said penguins live in warm climates, she didn't have any knowledge of it for herself. Therefore, this child was forbidden to write that paper as a first grader. And it really damaged her as far as her ability to think outside of the box when, I'm thinking there's all these type of penguins that live in these warmer climates.
Or just feel like I get to explore and learn something. And if an adult tells me that's impossible, well, then I guess I'm wrong. So
what I've learned about the Humboldt penguins living in a 96-degree cage at our zoo, I have to hide that, or I have to be afraid of it. It makes my teacher upset. And this is a first grader. This is a first grade child that this teacher is actively intimidating.
Yeah. Oh, I could tell you some stories about that too with my older kids. And for the same reason why I end up saying, I just can't subject my children. I can't have them in an environment where a teacher despises them and belittles them.
Because they're not
just being who they are.
Exactly. And learning things that they want to learn and finding out information that maybe the teacher is unaware of. So it was traumatizing for her. But so these are experiences that created it a hardship for her in the homeschool area, because she didn't know how to think for herself, because she was chastised for learning things that were outside the scope of a teacher's knowledge as a very, very young student. Yeah. So, So anyway.
So then we began.
And then
in September.
This whole frustration with having a school system that my kids needed to stick to. Math is at this time, language arts is at this time, history is at this time. it was difficult. And then Kelly had us read Thomas Jefferson Education. And it just brought up all these things about, oh, kids do love to learn. And I see this in my child. My son is so talented in the areas of military history and world history. And he's got such a curiosity and knowledge about it. Let him pursue that. And my daughter, she doesn't know what she wants to do yet because she's been stifled forever in the public school system. So she has no idea. So just leave her alone. And she's finally coming around to having her interest in studying the things she wants to study. The Thomas Jefferson Education spoke exactly a truth to the things I had seen, but I had been told to ignore, which is kids have a passion for learning. And you need to foster that. You don't need to sit them down and tell them to read a book that they hate for an hour every single day and kill their passion for learning, because that's what it does. And it was a hard transition for me because it was a huge mind switch. How can I not have my kid learn math, language arts, history, science every single day? They need to have these classes every day. Well, no, they don't. It's more important that they learn how to learn. And when they're studying things they're passionate about, they're learning how to learn.
So Adam is 16. One of the little conversations we had this last year, my granddaughter's 13, and she doesn't write well. I mean, you can barely read anything she writes, right? I mean, not only the handwriting, but the spelling, devoid of punctuation or any kind of grammar. And I mentioned that one day, and you said, well, Adam, same thing. I was like, whoa, that's brave. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a hard struggle. That was a parenting learning curve for sure. When he was in elementary school, he did great at reading. So I did not understand when he couldn't do writing, and he was not doing well on spelling quizzes and such. And so I would drill him on spelling words: who, what, where, when, why. See them, say them, write them 10 times for every word until you can get it. And then I'd have a quiz on him and he would spell them wrong. How could you possibly not spell these properly? We just did this, don't you? And he looked at me one day and he said, Mom, he's this little kid in the K1-2 classroom. And he said, don't you think if I could do this, I would? And it was a light bulb moment for me. And we had done these spelling lists for probably a solid month and a half. And the frustration was huge. Every time we'd move on to a new set of words, he'd instantly forget the old ones. And I just said, you know what, we're not doing spelling anymore, because I realized I was just crushing my kid, focusing on something he wasn't good at. And I said, I'm not doing it anymore. We're not doing spelling ever again. And I tossed it out the window and walked away from it forever. And so how that worked in school was they did whatever they did, and I didn't care. And I said, let's look at technology options. Let's do speech to text. Let's do other things, because what I learned is that writing and reading are not necessarily connected in the brain. And
not in everybody's brain.
No,
not in everybody's brain, right? Some people, yes, some people no.
And then I read a book called Johnny Tremaine. And when I read the intro on it, it's written by a woman who cannot spell the same word twice ever and doesn't use punctuation. She has this magic thing called an editor. Oh yeah, that. So I said, it's just not why we're focusing on this to try and make every kid a good speller is not helping these kids that are never going to be good spellers. And over the years, he's now 16. And if he writes me a handwritten note, I can usually read it. Even though the spelling is terrible, the phonetics are enough that I can figure out the words. And I just don't care, because that's not his talent. And he has been so much more successful since I have let that go than he was when he was trying to focus on that thing that is not going to come to him. Yeah. And that is fine.
That's so inspirational. I mean, I have to say it's really inspirational, because honestly, my daughter's really struggling with that. And she keeps saying, Mom, we've got to do some spelling with these kids. They just can't go into life without some of this basic handwriting and grammar and stuff like that. And I'd say, honey, yeah, it worries me too, a little bit. It does. I mean, let's be honest, it does worry me a little bit. But I just really believe in the adaptability. And like you're saying with technology, there's just other answers. And to, be drilling that. At this point, if they would, I mean, I remember in my early elementary years, getting a lot of negative feedback about my spelling when I was little. And I don't remember when I couldn't read. I mean, I don't have a memory of not being able to read. So I must have been very young picking that up. But I like to read. I didn't pay attention to the spelling. And I remember getting that negative feedback and thinking, well, I just need to work with this. And so I did. I started paying attention and developed my own little system for remembering how words, like I would, in my head, I wouldn't say read, I'd say re-add. So I remembered how to spell it. I came up with words that if I had to, I'd look it up, I'd have to know how to spell it, and I would give myself my own little phonetic way to do that until it became automatic. So, I mean, if you have the ability to do that, then you will do that if it's important to you. But if it just is not possible, it's like saying to somebody, everybody has to be able to keep a tune. Everybody has to be able to play chess. I mean, some of us just I can't play. I mean, I used to play chess when I was little, but I can't the strategy. It's no.
You're exactly right there. And that's what public school does, is it picks very specific things and says, everybody must be able to do these 5 things, end of story. But chess isn't in there. Music isn't in there. I've met kids in this homeschool thing that are so musically talented, but maybe they're not athletically talented.
Yeah.
But if you're not these specific things in school, you're a failure. And that's what we tell them. But they don't focus on what the kids' actual talents are. And there are so many talents that aren't even represented in the public school system that you miss the calling for these kids.
Right. Well, I mean, I had a couple of kids. My daughter didn't read till she was 12. And then my son, the son right below her, learned to read, but he hated it. I mean, and he really struggled with it. And he's going into dental school.
And so it was not an inhibition for his life.
But he adapted. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have dyslexia. He just cannot sit down, it's the ADHD, whatever it is, and focus like that for hours on textbooks. And actually the son below him, who just graduated from BYU, I mean, a hard school. It's very hard to get in, and it's very hard to stay in, and it's very hard to graduate from. And he just graduated. They adapt. They're auditory learners, so they adapted to auditory, and both of them read voraciously, but they just don't read. They listen.
My daughter does the same thing. She listens to them, and that's how she soaks them in. And we need to be more accepting of different ways of learning.
Yeah. And
listening to a book, if that is how it gets into your brain, is just as good as reading a book if that's how it gets into your brain.
Yeah. Nick he just would tell people, I need to record the lecture. And then he'd listen to it again if he needed to. Yep. So, I mean, in today's world, there's no reason. And it's one of the reasons why the public school system is just archaic. It's just not even a model anymore it's even usable. It just, the whole thing needs to be chucked. Completely chucked.
Well, I think that parents need to realize their value in recognizing their kids' talent and being there for their kids. And maybe not everybody can homeschool, but I think a lot of people who think they cannot really can. It's more about, homeschooling is more about enjoying your kids and fostering their love of life and learning. And we don't teach that as an acceptable way to educate. But it's really, I believe, the best way to educate is just be a parent that loves the heck out of your kids and is truly interested in them and their interests and wants to foster them and help them in the world.
Yes, I agree. See, I had the opposite problem that you have with your kids. I had the opposite problem. It's not that they weren't natural learners, but they didn't really want to do any research, or they just wanted to be out playing. They wanted to be out doing creative things outside. And that was worrisome for me. But I like, you can only read Thomas Jefferson Education so much before you go, I'm just going to have to let this be, whatever it is.
Right.
Because I cannot, I don't have the energy. I don't have the wherewithal to sit down and just crack a whip on 6 children. It's not possible.
I think that loss of energy is an advantage, because when I started losing my energy and just said, okay, these kids are picking their own directions, it worked better.
Yeah.
And as far as kids that don't want to necessarily engage in a specific topic, I think our school has a real advantage on using positive peer pressure to get kids to engage in things that they otherwise wouldn't. And that was a difficult thing with homeschooling, was lack of peer interaction at online schools. And when we started this homeschool group and my kids started interacting with other kids their own age that are doing the same thing and writing these reports, for example, they would never have written reports if they hadn't been encouraged by other kids or wanted to perform for their peers.
So let's talk about the social aspect of this, because that's precisely what I found with we banded together with one or two other families for most of the time, until I think my youngest son was like going into 6th grade. So for a period of about 8 years, we had 1 or 2 families that we got together with just once a week, and sometimes in midweek for fun, but mostly it was for any kind of schooling. It was just the 1 day a week. It was, and I don't have a child. I do not have a socially retarded child. It's amazing. And we had really limited, not that I kept them from social interaction. They just were happy with a few friends that were good friends that were in their same groove. That was enough. They didn't need giant groups of kids to be socialized. They had the adults in their life. They were on sports teams, or they were in bands where there was a more controlled environment, and you didn't have bullying going on. You didn't have, any of that going on, because they're going to learn something, or they're on a sports team. And you can, if there's any of that going on, you can go to the coach and say, this is going on, so I need you to put a stop to it, which happened a few times, actually, especially in wrestling. But I didn't go to the coach because I was told not to. But at that point, they could handle it a little better. But anyway, what I'm saying is they don't need crowds of kids. And so, comment on that.
The small group of kids that my kids have interacted with have had more of a positive influence on them than all of the kids in their entire school history combined. In fact, I would say the negative influences that are so pervasive and prevalent at public school damages kids. You have a lot of harmful social interactive things, especially with social media. There's just not enough adult interaction. There's too many kids. They're in their own cliques doing all kinds of healthy things. The jokes are things like, they're smoking, or they're using the restroom in our vaping locker, because they go to the bathrooms and they do vapes and drugs and all the things that they do. They bully each other because they're just Lord of the Flies, highly unsupervised, because there are so many kids with so many distressing problems, because that's where kids with problems go, is to public schools. So if you have not coming from a tragically broken home with all kinds of, my parents in jail, and my grandparents shot themselves, and there's siblings,
a lot of substance abuse. A lot of substance abuse, a lot of, pornography.
Yes, all these kids are dealing with all these things, and they go to public school. So if you have a healthy kid in that mix, and you've got kids that are dating at 5th grade, and they think it's fun to date the middle school kids that are dating high schoolers, and their boyfriend girlfriend exchanging constantly, and there's all this drama in their lives. It's not healthy.
Yeah, and this is what we say we need to have our kids socialized to do. This is the socialization. If people look at this, I mean, look at it for what it is. So my boys had my two wrestling boys had a strength and conditioning coach that they worked with for several years, in early morning workouts. And he had from a previous marriage, he had a daughter come and live with him, and went up to the high school for the orientation. She's a freshman, and the head cheerleader was the guide going through the school, showing them where the classrooms were, and this for counseling, where the gym is, this is blah, blah, blah. And she gets to a certain place in the school, and she says, now, if you really want to have sex, you go in this corner because the cameras can't see you.
Yeah, and the kids know all that kind of stuff. It's not.
This is what the guide is telling this little freshman.
Yeah, exactly.
This kind of thing. Karen was just like, ah!
Yeah.
What the heck is going on?
If you have a kid that's raised in a healthier environment, they think there's something wrong with them when they're not engaging in a lot of unhealthy activities like the rest of their peer groups. So what I found is when we switched to the homeschool group, none of those kids had cell phones, or if they did, they were not using them at all. So
Right.
There's no media interaction. They're actually interacting human to human with each other under highly supervised conditions. There's not bullying going on because there's parents right there. And so you're growing kids in a loving environment, guided by people who genuinely care about their upbringing. And there's plenty of adults available to make sure that positive interactions are happening. And the transition has been huge.
The culture gets established, and they learn culture, which is every bit as important as any other kind of learning. Learning how to establish a culture in a group setting is more important than anything else you learn, right? And that's really been the magic of this group and every group that I've been a part of, because my kids are still best friends with the kids of those two families. They still, I mean, just last summer when one of the friends graduated from dental school, who interested my son, who's now going to dental school. He finished up, he got a job, and my son helped him move, helped him go there and get settled. I mean, they're 30 years old and they're both single. And I mean, it's just stuff like that, it's just, that's who they call when they want to do something, or when they need something, they call each other. It's a culture, that happened.
Yes.
And because they just have this shared understanding of the proper way to be a friend.
Absolutely.
And yes. You almost don't get that outside of anymore.
If you don't have a really highly supervised environment, you really don't get it. So you need a highly supervised environment of adults who share the philosophy. It's really important that the adults share the philosophy, because if you have an adult in the group that thinks, well, I'm going to teach my kid to manipulate other kids so that they can have an advantage, then you have a toxic situation. So if you have adults that are all on the same page of, no, we're here to help each other, we're here to be honest with each other, we're here to grow each other, then you have a really great situation to raise kids in.
Yeah. So that's why I jumped at the when I heard about the group, I was like, yes. Because my grandkids needed it so bad. And I was talking about, getting a group started down in Oregon City, because we're going to be moving down there this summer. And not that we were going to quit this group this year, but that we were going to get something going so that, the year after that, when my daughter is finished with her program, she could slip into something, because I wasn't sure how dedicated she was going to be coming, north. And Ellie and Andy were both like, please don't quit the group. Tell me we're not going to, not be able to go next year. I said, no, we're going to go, I'll drive you, because they're just way too, they're just loving everybody so much.
That's
And
what my kids said. When my kids heard that you guys might be starting a group in Oregon City, they said, does that mean Andy and Ellie aren't going to be there anymore? And they were heartbroken.
yeah, it's been hard to lose the members we've lost this year to people moving. It's been,
but I think that more schools need to pop up like this. We need more of this in our communities. We need a school in Oregon City. We need a school in Lake Oswego. We need a school everywhere. We need them.
Well, that's why I'm promoting this, Tracy. That's exactly my conclusion too, and why I decided to just start devoting my time to promoting this. People need to hear your stories. Need to hear stories like this. They need to connect, point A to where they are, to point J where they can be. They need to understand how to go through those steps and what you do and why it, the awakening that happens when you just decide you're going to discover this and open your mind to it and study about it a little bit and talk to some people. Most people are just like, their mentality is just like ours was. And I was the same way. The first year I homeschooled, I tried to do school at home. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't.
It's just, and then when you finally get past that hump, you get over that hump, you go, so what's the, alternative? And you start looking at alternatives. And then then there's just this evolution that happens. You just start going down this road and things reveal themselves a step at a time. But it takes some faith. It takes
a lot of faith, because
it was a lot of faith and just letting go.
It was a huge dive. It was a huge dive to I was not on board with my kids not finishing a regular. What do I do about a diploma for them? Now I think, why do I don't even want my kids to have a diploma. I think that is a hindrance to them. Well, do I need a GED? No, you don't need a GED. You have homeschool kids and they are thriving and they will thrive, and people see that. So all these questions that pop up, it's not an easy cliff to fall off of. And I feel like I was pushed because of all of these negative things. It's one of those situations where if it gets finally bad enough and it is so absolutely terrible that you have to make a choice, finally you do. And that's where I was at. I really was pushed off the cliff, and I am so grateful that I was pushed off the cliff, because it's been the best thing to ever happen for my kids and family. Absolutely the best. But it takes a ton of faith to take that dive and just trust that it's going to be okay and follow. I feel so grateful that we have Thomas Jefferson education book to say, it's okay. And here's the steps. And here's why not to push little kids. Here's why you need to allow youth to be youth and children to be children, because it will come fast enough and they will hit these ages where they just want to grow themselves in whatever direction they're growing. Maybe it's music, maybe it's, I don't know. I use an example of the guy in Colorado that's the Dragon Man. His passion was all these guns and firearms, and he is this educator of people about World War history, and that was his passion. Who would ever think that for their kid? Only he could know that. Right. Or the people that started the indoor bike park, they loved riding bicycles, and they set up the indoor bike park for people to come, use, enjoy, learn, and grow and have fun. That was their passion, riding BMX bikes. And they turned it into a business, and they turned it into something they could share with the community. And who chooses for their kid to have bike riding as a passion? No, nobody but the kid. So, and it's not that you don't need other skills develop, but you can't stifle their natural drive. And that's what school does, is it stifles a lot of natural drive.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is, or the truth is, the reality is that in the new economy that we have, the information economy, right? You're going to have lots of people making a ton of money. Like the company that I'm working with is teaching me how to do an online business right now. High school dropout, taught himself to be a professional jazz musician, and did that for 10 years before he injured his hand. And he started this company 3 years ago, and he's a multi-millionaire. in 3 years. He learned digital marketing first. Like he started about 10 years ago. Yeah, he's a young guy. And all the people that he's now, surrounded himself with they're all just young guys. None of them have college educations. Most of them didn't graduate from high school. They got immersed in something that they loved.
That's right. And we are told
it's so inspirational. I mean, it's so incredibly inspirational.
We're told in our society, if you don't go to college, you will be nothing. And I can think of many examples of people who didn't graduate high school, dropped out of school.
Yeah, I don't have a college education. I'm just turning the things that I've learned, and I'm just creating a community of people that want to talk about and support each other and talk about the importance of being a real mentor to your kids. And I'm going to do well, because this is a huge, I'm not trying to do well. Huh?
You've already done well, because you're spreading a passion to people that needs to be spread.
Yeah. It's very exciting, actually. It's very fun to talk about this, because you inspire me. Every time I talk to somebody, I just get so much more excited about this, because we're going to change people's lives. People are going to watch this, Tracy, and it's going to change somebody's life.
It changed our lives. It changed our lives to make the switch. And I'm so grateful that we have guides. We don't have to, the way has been paved for us. And I'm so grateful for that. I can't say it enough, because it's such a scary thing. And to already have a guide there, and people that have done this road and they've put in the hard work, I have it easy.
Right. I know. Yeah, it's true. It's very true. If you ever get to hear Oliver DeMille and Rachel, take the opportunity. I've been to a couple of their seminars when they used to have the school down in Cedar City. I've been to a couple of conventions where they were the keynote speakers. Oliver's very entertaining. He's just an amazing speaker. Rachel's very good too. And they're just very charismatic and just full of so much information and interesting stories. And so anyway,
and I'm sure
you do that. However, this isn't necessarily for everyone at first. I think you come to it. I'm working with another group in, like I said, in Estacada, 4 or 5 women that are getting together because they can't have their kids in school anymore. They've been pushed off the cliff, and they're trying to figure it out. And I'm just going to let them figure it out. I'm just documenting their journey.
Yep.
On their Zoom calls, they get together and talk about, their ideas. And I'm saying, I actually mute myself and stop my video and just let them talk, just because I want people to see how this evolves and how you can, how this all starts. And anyway, it's fun.
I applaud anybody who can take the journey, because it's a scary one to take. I'm just grateful that we have, the way has been paid by people like you who homeschooled their kids and said this will be possible. And look, my kids are great people. They didn't get screwed up because they homeschooled.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate you being willing to share your story, because I'm going to flood a YouTube channel, a blog, a podcast, and Facebook with this message. And people that are looking will find it, and it'll help.
Thank you for doing what you do. So I love it. All right.
Okay. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.